lesson for today is in the Gospel according to St. Mark, the 10th chapter, beginning at verse 46. Mark 10, 46. Then they reached Jericho, and as Jesus and his disciples left, a large crowd followed. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting beside the road. When Bartimaeus heard that Jesus of Nazareth was nearby, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." "Be quiet," many of the people yelled at him. But he only shouted louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." When Jesus heard him, he stopped and said, "Tell him to come here." So they called the blind man. "Cheer up," they said. "Come on, he's calling you." Bartimaeus threw aside his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked. "My rabbi," the blind man said, "I want to see." And Jesus said to him, "Go, for your faith has healed you." Instantly the man could see, and he followed Jesus down the road. This is the word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. Let us pray. Lord, open our hearts and our minds that we may hear with joy your word for us this day. And as we hear it, let it plant seed that will grow and bear fruit in our hearts, in our lives, in this church and beyond, now and forevermore. Amen. I seldom ever do it. I don't like to do it. It's negative, and I'm a positive person. Have you caught it yet? I titled my sermon with an oxymoron. You know what an oxymoron is? It's two words that contradict each other. You know, like dry ocean, warm ice, and my favorite all-time oxymoron, honest politician. Passive Christianity is an oxymoron because you can't be passive and be a Christian at the same time. The 20th century's obsession with participating while being passive got imported into the church. Somehow we gave respectability to the notion that you can be a spectator and be a Christian at the same time. Tragically. No wonder the charge of hypocrisy has been levied against the church so much in the last 50 years. Kind of coincides with that mentality. How then do we reorient our thinking to see that Christianity calls us to be active in our faith? Well, let's look at the story today from Mark's Gospel. That's a good place to begin because it gives us a wonderful example. In Mark's Gospel, the 10th chapter, Jesus and his disciples have been in Jericho and are now leaving to go to Jerusalem. On the way out of town, they passed where people had gathered on the side of the road. Among them was a beggar named Bartimaeus. In those days, blind or crippled people would sit by the road where the pilgrims going in and out of town would put money in their cups. Begging was an honest way of making a living if you were disabled. There was no welfare system. So Bartimaeus had sat out there for who knows how long, begging on the side of the road. But this day he heard that Jesus of Nazareth, the man who was working miracles, was coming up the road. And so Bartimaeus began to yell out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." People around him said, "Shut up. Nobody wants to hear that." But Bartimaeus was not dismayed. He yelled even louder. And Jesus heard him amidst a tumult of the crowd. And he stopped the procession, just stopped dead in his tracks, and said, "Bring him to me." And somebody said, "Bartimaeus, he's calling you." And Bartimaeus threw off his cloak and got up and ran to Jesus. Now, I would love to have seen that, a blind man running. Does that sound passive to you? But he got to Jesus, fell at his feet, and Jesus said, "What do you want me to do for you, Bartimaeus?" And he said, "Lord, I want to see. Please let me see." And Jesus said, "Rise and go. Your faith has healed you." And at that moment, when he got up off of his knees, his eyes were open, and for the first time, Bartimaeus could see the world, could see the faces of the people he talked to, could look into the face of the Son of the living God. The very first thing he saw. Amazing, this story. Because it calls us to realize that Christianity is anything but passive. Can't be passive and be a Christian. Jesus was not passive. In fact, he taught us in the Gospels that faith and love in his kingdom are verbs. Not nouns. And Bartimaeus was anything but passive. Yelling out, he could have sat there idly by the road and done nothing. That's passive. But no, he was active. He yelled out, he called out, and Jesus called him. So how can you and I learn from this story how to move from being passive to being active people of faith? First thing is, you have to submit yourself to God. Bartimaeus was willing to do that. He fell at his feet, called him rabbi, submitted himself. See, without submission, you'll never be active. Passive people can only be passive because they refuse to submit to God. But submission means we surrender our hearts and our minds, our feelings and our wills, our dreams and our ideas, all submit to God. Now under His control. And when we submit ourselves, things begin to change. Nothing happens until the first there is submission. When Melissa was 2.5 years old, we were bathing her one night, discovered she had a lump in her groin. We panicked and went to the doctor. It turned out to be a hernia, an inguinal hernia. So we went to see a surgeon and got scheduled for surgery. I'll never forget that day when he and the nurse came out to take Melissa back for the surgery. As they turned to walk off, I grabbed hold of his white coat and snatched it. And he turned around and said, "What is it?" I said, "I want you to know something, Doc. She's mine." And he looked at me and winked one eye and said, "She's mine now." We weren't afraid anymore. But she could not get healing until first we submitted to the healing skills of a physician who knew what to do. When we submit ourselves to God, God knows what to do with our life to help us live out our faith actively in the world. But it means submission above all else. When you read about the great saint Francis of Assisi, go back and read how Francis became that person. He first had to submit his life. He came from a wealthy family. He had all kinds of other things he could have done. But he submitted his life to God, and God called him to go and be a traveling preacher. He once said to a couple of his proteges, he said, "Look, our goal is to preach the gospel and use words if we have to." Is that not active? First, submission. Surrendering the heart, the mind, the will to the living God. And He'll show us which way to go to live out our faith. Secondly, we have to clean out the stuff, do some debriding, the stuff that hinders our relationship with God and hinders our ability to be active, our willingness to be active for God. Some things just don't belong anymore, and when you and I submit to God, He'll show us what they are, so we can begin getting rid of them, getting them out of our life, getting them out of the way. As we were listening to the video today, and Andy Stanley was teaching it, it struck me that a lot of what he was saying was very much in line with what I'm thinking in my sermon today. Never ever let the urgent demand get in the way of the important responsibilities. And the way you do that is get rid of those things that will hinder you. I read a story some years ago, a true story about a young man who went to college. His mother decided to pay him a visit and see how life was going at the college in the dormitory. She got to his dormitory. People there helped her find his room. She knocked on the door. No one was there, but the door was unlocked, so she went in. Well, it was a typical boys' college dorm room. It was a mess. She started cleaning up the room. And she noticed that there were some pictures on the wall that, shall we say, were very, very colorful pictures. And she thought, well, I'm not going to take them down. But she was putting things away and discovered a poster that he had been given by the Church of Jesus. And she unrolled the poster and put it on the wall of his dorm. A few weeks later, she came back by to visit her son again, knocked on the door. He happened to be in his room studying, him and his roommate. She opened the door and came in, and his son stood up, hugged his mother, introduced her to his roommate. She looked around the room, and the only picture on the wall was a picture of Jesus. She said, "Son, what happened to the other pictures?" He said, "Mama, they don't belong where he is. They don't belong where he is." And if we submit ourselves to Him and He lives in our life, the things that don't belong, we'll know, because He'll tell us. He'll show us. And they've got to go. They've got to go. But it's all about our attitude. Because you see, when you and I submit ourselves, our attitudes begin to change. We look at things differently. We do things differently. We approach life differently. We approach our work differently. We approach our relationships differently. Reverend Charles Leary tells a great story. Many years ago, there was a businessman, and in that era of time, this was a very common thing, would go to the barbershop once a week, And he would get his shoe shine. There was a shoe shine boy there. And one day he said to the shoe shine boy, he said, son, you do the most spectacular job of shining my shoe. You don't miss a spot. You do it with such care. I just got to ask you, what is it that you go that extra route and work so hard and do such a perfect job? Why do you do that every single time? And the young man looked at him and said, sir, when I shine a pair of shoes, I shine every pair of shoes as if Jesus himself was wearing them. If you and I approach everybody as if they were Jesus, like he approached every pair of shoes, the way we live our faith suddenly becomes active. Can't be passive and look at people that way. Remember that story in Matthew's Gospel where Jesus said, I was hungry and you fed me, thirsty, you gave me to drink. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you took care of me. Now, the ones who were the sheep said, Lord, we don't remember seeing you like that. He said, yeah, but when you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. Now, does that sound like a passive faith or an active faith? That's active. But the goat said, we never saw you that way. What you did not do, passive. You did not do to me. So we have to get rid of the things that hinder us, whatever they are. Don't worry. If you submit yourself to God, you'll know what they are and he'll show them to you. I remember being in my office at Hope Mills. Our church was on the main thoroughfare there. Major highway, traffic in and out all the time, up and down. And it was not uncommon for people to stop, ask directions, ask for help, ask for prayer, whatever. One afternoon I was in my study working and somebody came in. I heard them. And they came down the hallway and knocked at my office door, and I got up, and it was a man I'd never seen before, stranger. He said, Reverend, can I talk to you for a few moments? I said, certainly. He said, can we go into the sanctuary? I said, yes. So we went in and sat down on the pew, and he said, I've been struggling with something for a while, and I need the Lord's help to deal with it. I said, okay. If you want to tell me what it is, I'll be glad to listen, and we'll pray. He said, well, I got this bad habit. I want to give it up. I said, okay. And he pulled out a pack of cigarettes. And he said, look, would you pray with me? So we prayed. God would help him deal with that habit that he wanted to give it up. And I said, brother, if you really mean it, go up there and lay them on the altar. Give them to God. And he laid that pack of cigarettes on the altar. I told the janitor, I said, don't take them off. Leave them there for a while. Let it be a striking symbolism and lesson to us that when we give these things up, God will take them. I didn't hear from him again, so I don't know whatever happened, but I hope and pray that in that moment, he gave up. He got rid of some things that were hindering his faith with the Lord and took care of it. Not to knock people that smoke. I'm not doing that. I'm saying in his case, he felt God showing him to get rid of this. When God shows you to get rid of something, you got to do it. So we submit ourselves and we get rid of it. We do some house cleaning, some soul cleaning. But there's one more thing. We also have to have a compulsion, feel compelled that the Christian faith was not just meant to deliver us and set us free from sin and death. It was also meant to transform us, heart, mind, and soul, and call us forth to go out and live out our faith actively in the world. That's where we missed the boat. We know all about being delivered, being redeemed, being saved, but we forget about the transformation. That's why Paul said in his 12th chapter of his letter to Romans, don't be conformed to this world, i.e., passive. Be transformed by the renewal of your minds so that you think and see the world as God does, which he's calling us forth to be active. Go and do, Jesus said. Go and be, Jesus said. Go and serve, Jesus said. That's active. William Lord Garrison was called the Liberator. He was probably the strongest abolitionist in America during the slavery days. One day, he had referred to what he was doing as melting the mounds of ice of slavery. One day, a reporter asked him, Mr. Garrison, why are you so intensive about this? He said, it's almost like you're on fire. And he responded, I have to be on fire. There's lots of mountains of ice yet to melt. We have to be on fire if we're going to deal with the mountains of ice in our world today. The people who are hurting, the people who are angry, the people who are looking for direction, the people who are confused. And you don't have to go anywhere but Facebook to see how many people there are like that. Or the newspaper, or the news. You and I have to be like William Lord Garrison. We've got to be ice melters because we let the love of God come through us. And that love always melts the ice of bigotry and hatred and meanness. One of the strongest segregationists in America in the last part of the 20th century was a man named George Wallace. You may have heard that name. He was governor of Alabama. He's the man that stood in the front door of the University of Alabama on national television and said, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever. Some years later, he was running for president, and an assassin shot him, and the bullet lodged in his spine, and he was crippled, paralyzed from the waist down. One of the attendants who took care of him every day, bathed him, cleaned him, fed him, did whatever needed to be done, was a black man. One day, Mr. Wallace asked him, "Why are you so good to me? Why are you so kind to me? You know my history." He said, "Mr. Wallace, I'm a Christian. I serve Jesus. He told me to love my enemies and pray for those persecuted." Day by day, that man's witness touched the heart of George Wallace until that day that with tears in his eyes, he begged for forgiveness from that man. But not only that, George Wallace asked to meet with the civil rights leaders, and he begged forgiveness from all of them. The same people he opposed and hated. Now he asked for their forgiveness, and they embraced him and prayed over him. You and I can melt those mountains of ice, but we got to be active about faith. Cannot be passive. If we're passive, destruction is going to continue to happen. Dr. Ignaz Semmelweis was a great physician, a very smart man, who worked in a hospital in Europe, and a lot of women in that hospital who came to give birth or had other issues were dying. Semmelweis became convinced that the doctors were spreading infection to patients. And so he kept telling his colleagues, you need to wash your hands, you need to clean up. Because when he did that, women did not get sick. They were healthy. And then some of them didn't believe him. They thought it was some kind of strange idea that this man had. But Ignaz Semmelweis said to them one day in a staff meeting, he said, listen, please, for God's sake, just wash your hands. Just wash your hands. Don't be passive. Be active in your care of your patients. Don't be passive in trying to live out your faith. If Bartimaeus had stayed passive, he would have sat in that by side of that road in the darkness of his blindness forever. He would have died that way. But he spoke up. He got active. His life changed. By the way, you notice what Mark says? He got up and followed Jesus. I'd love to know how many times the people in Jericho and everywhere else had to hear the story about his healing from him. As he shared that story, his witness and testimony. But I'll guarantee he was never passive again. Neither was the demoniac from Gadara who went and told the people all that the Lord had done for him. And so many others. Zacchaeus, the woman at the well. Notice how they all become happy. We're invited to do that too. We will sit in the darkness of passivity unless you and I throw off the cloaks that hold us back and rise up and go. And Jesus is calling us now to rise up and go and put our faith on the line. Make it active. As that old axiom goes, put your money where your mouth is. Put your faith where your commitment is. And let the world see it. Be a living example of the love of God in your life so that others may see it and know. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.